What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Panthers Advice. Today, man, we're going to jump right into it. Scott Fitterer was let go this morning. Now, this is huge, right? It's a blessing in disguise that the Panthers went 2-15. Now, why do I say a blessing in disguise? Well, obviously, it sucks to have the worst record. But now we get to hire a new head coach and a new GM at the same time. And the reason that's important is because let's look at the Bryce Young trade right here. If you want to give away the picks, that's fine. But why would you trade away the best receiver on the team by far when you bring in a young quarterback? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. And then you don't really bring a receiver of that caliber back, right? You have Adam Thielen, who's now, 33, 34. I mean, he's a good route runner. He's going to get open. But why would you give away the best weapon and then not replace it? That makes zero sense to me. Completely 0 cents. Now let's talk about the other thing. Why it's good that we have a new GM and new head coach. Half the coaching staff wanted Bryce Young. The other half wanted CJ Stroud. This is what I'm saying, a blessing in disguise, right? I'm glad we have a new GM and a new head coach that should be on the same page, that want to bring in pieces to help Bryce Young to make that defense even better. And the defense is going to be a whole nother subject we're going to get into this offseason. But man, hopefully having a new head coach and a new GM, they can work together and bring in pieces to fit Bryce Young's scheme, right? Let's jump to some of the stuff that's happened the past few years. The first one to jump to is Christian McCaffrey to the Niners for a second, third, and fourth round. We're not going to dwell on this too much. It's been happening for a couple of years, right? So now let's jump to this one right here. They turned down 2 firsts for Brian Burns, and they didn't get a deal done. It just never felt like Burns was a priority. So, I mean, were they going to really try and sign him again? And if they weren't, why not take the 2 first? But, I mean, it just lines up with everything else that's already happened in the past few years. Let me know what you guys think. But, I mean, I'm not shocked by this at this point. I mean, we finished 2-15. You saw who they brought in. You saw who they drafted, which we're going to get to right here in the 2023 NFL Draft. So we talked about the Bryce Young thing. Now let's talk about Mingo. Mingo. My thing here with Mingo is if you go look at his highlight tape, and I've mentioned this a few times, a lot of those routes aren't routes that fit Frank's system. So let's talk about before Frank was fired. When they drafted Mingo, this made no sense to me. There's no way Frank wanted Mingo. Maybe he did, right? Maybe he did, but if you go watch Mingo at Ole Miss, he didn't run the out routes. He didn't run curl routes. I mean, there were a couple in there, but his highlight plays were the post routes, the go routes, right? The corner routes, little pump and go. Not the offense that Frank runs. This made no sense to me. No sense at all. Now let's talk about DJ Johnson. This one I go back and forth on because I'm an Oregon guy, but I think DJ only had 1 year, maybe a year and a half at defensive end. That's who we pick, right? No more offensive help. You bring in a young quarterback, and you take one guy. That's Mingo. Really, the defense, man, the defense was already balling, right? You saw it Barno from last year, the year before. I don't understand what we were thinking right here taking DJ Johnson. Again, I'm an Oregon guy. I like DJ, but you bring in a young quarterback. You trade away the best receiver. I mean, are you going to put all your money in on Mingo? That made no sense to me. Chandler was hurt. And then you talk about Robinson, the safety. This one confused me. It's almost like the running back to a point. When they brought in Miles Sanders, they had Blackshear and they had Hubbard. They draft Robinson. You already have Chin. You're going to move him down, right? Kind of play a rover type. You bring in Von Bell. Why are we drafting Robinson right here? I mean, the draft, it just didn't make sense. I get the Mingo pick fine, but again, I go back to it didn't fit Frank's offense, so it made no sense to me. Then you draft an edge guy with the next pick. Let me know what you guys think. Let's jump to the draft the year before, the 2022 draft. This one's going to be interesting, all right? We talk about Icky, and Icky, man, he's fallen off, but I'm not completely giving up on him. And the reason I say that is because the year before this year, everybody was high on him, right? I don't know what happened this year. How did he regress this bad? Because, man, it felt like every week it was like, he did this wrong. He did this wrong. Somebody goes right past on one side. Somebody goes right past him on the other side. They're running stunts targeting him. I mean, it feels like the defensive coaches are literally targeting Icky for some of the stunts and everything that they're running. So I don't know what happened between last year and this year, but I'm not giving up on him quite yet just because we saw potential, right? So hopefully we can get back to that stage. That's my thoughts. Let's talk about the next guy. That's Matt Corral. This one I'm mixed on, and this one with Matt is so interesting because while I'm not the biggest fan of Matt, I felt like he never got a shot. And what makes it even more interesting was that they draft Matt. The next year they bring in Frank, and then they draft Bryce Young, who apparently Frank didn't even want. So let me get this straight. The year before Frank comes in, they draft Matt. The year after that, they bring in Frank, who doesn't want Matt. Then they draft Bryce Young, who Frank doesn't want. I mean, you see why we need a new head coach and a new GM. You draft Matt. You bring in a head coach who doesn't want Matt. That's fine. That head coach wants a different quarterback. So then you draft a quarterback that's not the quarterback that Frank. I mean, y'all got to make it make sense, bro. Got to make it make sense. All right. They ended up drafting Brandon Smith after that. Barno. We'll see what happens with Barno. Definitely a lot of potential. Saw a little bit of flashes. So we'll see what happens with that. And then Cade Mays, who's still on the team. So the 2022 draft, we'll see what happens. But again, the Matt thing is just, man, it just sums up the past few years. Let's jump to the 2021 draft. This one's going to be interesting because I felt like this was a decent draft, right? J.C. Horn, obviously injury prone. If he wasn't, that's a whole nother story. You got TMJ. TMJ, he actually played. We're going to go over that this week at some point. He did get some reps at the last game of the season. So I don't know what the Panthers are going to do there. I don't know. Going into this year, I thought there was potential, but who knows what's going on anymore? Who knows? You got Brady Christensen, Tommy Tremble. I like Tommy a lot. Probably my favorite tight end out of him. Ian Thomas, Hayden Hurst, Sullivan. I think I'm missing somebody too. But out of all the tight ends, I like Tommy a lot. I'm not sure why they brought in Hayden Hurst. Right? I'm not sure why, because you're using Sullivan now. Used Ian Thomas to start the season. You got Tommy. What was the point of that? Then you got Hubbard right here too. Another person where it's like we have Hubbard and Blackshear, and yet we brought in Miles Sanders. What's the point? I mean, honestly, guys, what are we doing here? You had Tommy, you had Ian Thomas, you had Sullivan going into this year. I think Giovanni too. And then you bring in Hayden Hurst. You got Raheem, you got Hubbard, who both showed flashes at the end of last year. Then you bring in Miles Sanders. What? And the reason this confuses me is because Miles is a guy who needs to be in space, not between the tackles. Hubbard's the opposite. Hubbard wants to get physical. Blackshear can play a little bit of both, right? I wouldn't give him one or the other. I think he does excel in space, I guess, a little bit more. But I think Blackshear can do both. And I go back to this again, right? They took Mingo. It didn't make any sense because the way Mingo excels isn't through Frank's routes. The way Miles excels isn't through Frank's play calling. Frank with Jonathan Taylor, yes, through the tackles, Jonathan Taylor excels at that, right? Now, he's obviously a great all-around back. Miles Sanders does not excel through the tackles. So why would you bring him in? Why would you bring him in? It doesn't make sense, guys. Hayden Hurst, the same thing. We've already got 2 or 3 tight ends just like him. I mean, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Like I said, today is a blessing in disguise that they finished with the worst record in the NFL. Now, maybe I would have liked to have them finished, maybe not the worst, maybe the second or third worst, because it sucks to have the worst record. But now we get a new GM, a new head coach, and hopefully we can start building around the team, right? Complementing pieces to Bryce Young. Kind of figure out that offensive line. That might take a year or two. Hopefully get some receivers, bruh. Can we get some receivers? Please. Can we get some receivers? The defense all around isn't bad. Now, the front seven's amazing. We need some cornerback help, but overall the defense, they're pretty solid. I mean, they kept us in a lot of games this year. If we had an average defense, it would have been an even worse year. So let me know what you guys think. That's going to wrap it up. Post-game reaction coming out later today or tomorrow. This was breaking news, so I had to jump on that. Let me know what you guys think. I'm happy with today. Fire the GM, bring in a new one, new head coach. Hopefully turn things around. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take it easy.